Well, it's my honor and privilege to introduce today's guest speaker. I've been at Coastal for about 13 years, and shortly after I started coming, a family came, and I got to meet this guy, and I got to hear just like a glimpse of his story. And I mean, it's just one of those stories where it just kind of knocks your socks off. And he's a great man, and I am honored to be able to call him a friend of mine. So let's just give a round of applause to Jason Redman as he comes out on stage as our guest speaker this week. Jay Redman's been retired Navy SEAL, and he's been doing motivational speaking for 6 years now, right, buddy?
Thank you.
So, thanks for being here, buddy.
Absolutely. You too. Okay, come here. Lay down. Lay down. This is karma. So, karma, like good karma. So, karma is actually, believe it or not, karma is actually, it's an Iraqi spelling, K-H-A-R-M-A-H. And it's a city in Iraq, Al-Karma, right outside of Fallujah. And that's actually where I got all dinged up. So, that's how he got his name. So, how are we this morning? Okay, lay down. Lay down. There you go. Good job. So, like Dusty said, we have been at Coastal for, 10 or 11 years. We've been members now, and just it's been an amazing church for us. I love the church. I love the family. I love Pastor Hank and his message. Every time I come and speak, Pastor Hank delivers a message, and I'm like, I look at Eric and I'm going, man, he's talking right to me. So I'm hoping today that I can do the same thing to motivate and inspire all of you. Today we're going to talk about faith, and faith is a hard thing. I mean, when you really boil it down, faith is our ability to believe in something we cannot see or touch, and oftentimes you can't even feel it. But we believe based off intangible things that we have to take in. And I tell you what, one of those intangible things are miracles. And oftentimes, you know, when we talk about miracles, in this day and age, we have a natural tendency to downplay some of these amazing things that are out there. I mean, society downplays them. We are inundated with, you know, this world we live in of tweets and Instagram posts and Facebook posts, and obviously the media, we see all these things. And I think we're inundated with so much information and amazing things that oftentimes we don't even think about it. So when I was a kid, I was raised in the church, and my dad was a deacon at the church we were at, and if the doors were open, we were in church. That's just how it was. So I grew up with what I would call blind faith. I just believed because it was what we did. It was how I was raised. But as I got older, I started to become more analytical. I ask God sometimes why He gave me such an analytical mind, because I am that guy that I want to know why it works. I don't care what it is, I want to know why it works. And including faith, including things in the Bible, I want to know why. So as I got older and I started questioning and trying to understand these things, and as I read the Bible more, I was like, you know, in the Old Testament, we talk about all these miracles. In the New Testament, we talk about all these miracles that Jesus did. And I said, Lord, where are all the miracles? I want to see a miracle. I was like, I want you to solidify my faith. Just give me one thing to show me and just lock it in. Careful what you wish for. You know, when you talk about miracles, I mean, one of the bigger ones, you know, occurred when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. I mean, can you imagine just hanging out and you're walking along with some guy that obviously he's got this big following? You know, back in the day, Jesus was a heck of an influencer. You know, that's a media term for people who follow you. So really big influencers have giant followings. So if Jesus had an IG post, he'd have million. Like I think The Rock is like leading right now. I think he's got like 14 million followers. Jesus would have a lot of followers too. So you're wandering along, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, we have this guy, he's dead. And Jesus like just touches him, and the guy gets up and walks away. I mean, you'd be like, I want to know more about this guy. You know, that's an amazing miracle. And things like that happen all the time. John 12:1. Then Jesus, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany where Lazarus was, which had been dead, whom Jesus raised from the dead. Boom. I mean, that's amazing. The thing is, I saw things like that, and I still question. I want to see something like that. Give me something to lock it in. And I'll be honest, I began to feel like I'm a bad Christian. I'm a bad Christian because I question these things. You know, Lord, what's wrong with me? I know you're up there, but I'm really struggling. And as I studied more, I came to realize that just because you question doesn't mean you're a bad Christian. Because I started digging deeper, I started finding things about Jesus' own disciples who questioned, and they walked with him. They watched him raise Lazarus from the dead. They watched him perform all these miracles, yet some of them still had doubts. Thomas, one of Jesus' 12 disciples, watched Jesus do all these things. And after Jesus was crucified, someone told him that Jesus was still alive. And Thomas said, until I can put my finger in the holes in his hand and place my hand in the hole in his side where he was speared, I will not believe. So John 20, 26, and 28. And after 8 days, again his disciples were within. So they were all together, and Jesus with them. Place was shut down, doors were shut, and suddenly Jesus appeared. Jesus cometh, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst and said, peace be unto you. Then he looked at Thomas, talk about calling somebody out, and he said, reach hither thy finger and see my hands, and reach hither thy hand and put it into my side. And be not faithless, but believing. Thomas answered and said unto him, my Lord and my God. So here I was running along thinking I'm not a very good Christian, trying to figure things out. But what I began to understand is faith is a journey. And it is a journey that will never end. It is a journey where you'll have highs and you're going to have lows because life is hard. You're going to have these times that you question it. But what can make the difference is how we look at the world around us. Faith takes commitment, awareness, and it takes perspective. Awareness and perspective, two big things. Because through that, it enables us to take a break and take a step back and say, you know what? What just happened was amazing. It was a modern day miracle. Foundations in faith are all around us, even these modern day miracles. We only have to stop long enough to allow ourselves to become aware of them. I think sometimes in life, so many people look at hardship as, I don't want to say a curse, but just something that is really tough to go through. And oftentimes, it's during those times that our faith wavers. And we start to question, God, why would you allow us to go through this? Where are you, God? Oftentimes, I believe that those times are opportunities to actually solidify your faith, if you're willing to look. And oftentimes, he works some of the greatest miracles out of those moments. And even though it's hard as we go through them, those moments give us those two things, awareness and perspective, to build our faith. September of 2007, I was fortunate enough to be leading a team of Navy SEALs in the Al-Anbar province of Iraq. And we were going after a high-level al-Qaeda leader, and we walked into a very well-executed ambush. And myself and two other members of our six-man team were hit in this firefight. I was hit 8 times between my body and body armor, rounds in the arm, rounds in the face, and I was pinned down by 2 enemy machine guns and a group of about 14 to 15 enemy fighters. And as this firefight was raging and I was pinned down, I started dying. I mean, that's kind of the reality of the situation. I was losing a lot of blood, and I started thinking about the end. And I started thinking about my family. I started thinking about not being able to see them again. And I called out to God. In that moment, I said, I need your strength to go home. And interestingly enough, up until that point, as I was leading along, how I knew I was dying is I was going through all the signs of dying. Doctors and trauma surgeons and emergency medical professionals talk about the stages we go through. Oftentimes you've heard it called shock. This individual is in shock. Hypovolemic shock is actually the loss of blood. The blood pressure in your body can't continue to go. So what starts to happen, the vessels in your extremities clamp up, so it tries to pull blood into your core. This is why people get cold. I was going through that. This is why you start to lose feeling in your extremities. And it gets harder and harder to breathe because the lack of blood, as it's spilling out of your machine, you're not getting as much oxygen to all the key things you need to get oxygen to stay alive. So it gets harder and harder to think. It gets harder and harder to breathe. And I was going through all these phases, It's kind of like a car. All the emergency lights are going off, So, but, and I realized it. So I called out to God and I said, Lord, I need your strength to go home. I want to go home and see my wife and kids again. And in that moment, immediately, I had strength. And I don't know how long that period of time was from that time in the firefight until the medevac helicopter came in. But when the medevac helicopter finally came in, I went from this period of time where I couldn't even move, I couldn't even take a breath, to where I got up under my own power, I walked 75 yards, and I got on the helicopter, and I flew home. And the doctor saved my life. And the doctor said it was a miracle you survived. From the amount of blood loss I had sustained, they said they weren't sure how I survived. But I know, big guy above. So remember when I said, be careful of what you wish for? Hey, Lord, just give me a sign, just one sign to solidify my faith. Man, he hit me in the face with a 2x4. Pow, here you go. You're welcome. How you like me now? The interesting thing is, faith is such a hard journey because I will admit it rock solid solidified my faith for many years. And even now I look back on that moment. But faith is absolutely a journey at all times. And by maintaining that perspective and awareness around us and accepting the fact that sometimes you're going to have doubts, sometimes you're going to struggle. In the middle of that ambush, when all these bullets were flying, explosions were happening, and I thought I was dying, I was absolutely overwhelmed. I was scared. I was anxious. I felt stressed out in this moment. Am I going to make it out of here? Am I going to be able to go home? And what I began to realize is that people in life feel those exact same things. Some of you right now out there may not have been in a gunfight, but some of you out there have felt those exact same feelings. You've felt that anxiety. You've been absolutely overwhelmed. You've wondered how you're going to get out of this situation. And I survived an enemy ambush, but everyone in life goes through life ambushes. These unexpected moments that come along and just knock us off our feet. Some of you may be going through one right now. And it may not be enemy bullets or bombs blowing up, but to you, it feels the same. That feeling of being absolutely overwhelmed and afraid. And that's okay. It's okay to feel that way. Because the reality is, these moments are an opportunity to test our faith, to renew our faith, to be stronger and say, hey, Lord, I need the strength to go home. I need the strength to get through this situation. And he's there. And sometimes it doesn't come as quickly as we think it should, because of course we want it to come right now. But sometimes he recognized it is a journey, and it is an opportunity to get stronger, and an opportunity to renew our faith through that hardship, through that life ambush. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were a trio of fellas who unequivocally believed in their one true God. And at that time, King Nebuchadnezzar, who ruled the land, they believed in polytheism, multiple gods. And they were basically exterminating people who didn't believe in their beliefs. So he brought them before because some of his advisors said, hey, we got these three guys that are out there that are preaching, against what we believe. So he brought Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego before the king, and he basically said, is this true? You don't believe in what I believe? You don't believe in our multiple gods? And they said, it is true. We only believe in one God. And he said, well, you know what the deal is? Punishable by death. So if you don't claim your faith in our multiple gods, I'm going to throw you in this fiery furnace and burn you to death right now. I mean, how terrifying would that be? Standing there in that moment? I mean, you talk about anxiety, stress, and fear. I mean, how big is that? Daniel 3:24 and 25. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, didn't we not cast 3 men bound into the fire? They answered and said to the king, true, O king. He answered and he said, but I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the God. That's a pretty amazing story. And the reality is, every one of us in life are going to encounter these unexpected moments. Every one of us in life, at some point, are going to be put in that fiery furnace. And even though it hurts and it burns and we wonder how we're going to get through, that other guy is with you. He's with you and can give you strength as you go through that moment. As you go through that moment, if you're willing to lean on him. And here's the additional fact related to it. You may still struggle. You may still have hardship. You may even question, and that's okay. Because even some of the greatest leaders in the Bible questioned. When Jesus was captured and put on trial, some of the Roman advisors came to Peter, one of Jesus' strongest disciples, and said to him, aren't you with him? And he said, no, I don't know that man. Not just once, 3 times. Matthew 26:75, and Peter remembered the word which Jesus had said, before the cock crows, thou shalt deny me 3 times. And he went out and he wept bitterly because he was afraid. His faith wavered in this hardship. But the reality is, we never know when those moments are going to come. Those moments that do solidify our faith. These God moments, as I call them. These miracles that come along. Obviously, for Peter, that came a couple of days later when the guy he watched crucified rose from the dead and fulfilled that amazing prophecy. They happen all around us, though, today. You've all heard them. You've read stories. The grandmother that picks up a car off a family member that was trapped underneath it in a grievous accident. Every one of you in this room has seen miracles happen, whether you recognized in the moment or not. That moment on the battlefield was one of the miracles that I saw. I saw other incredible moments on the battlefield. I experienced another God moment several years prior to that. You see, I speak all across country on leadership, and I don't speak all across country on leadership because I was the greatest leader that ever lived. As a matter of fact, I failed at a very high level as a leader at one point in my career. And you learn so much more from failure than you do from success. But I fought against my failure. And so much so that I fought against it instead of owning it. that my military leadership at one point, some of the guys that I worked with basically said, you know what, this guy's dangerous. We should kick him out. He's going to end up getting people killed. He's going to end up making a mistake. We should take his trident and kick him out of the military. Thankfully, I had some people that believed in me and said, you know what, we believe in him. We're going to try and give him some additional opportunities to humble himself. And I'd love to tell you about that time I figured it out and woke up. Nah, I didn't. I'm hard-headed, super hard-headed. So I continued pushing against what had happened all the way up until this point that I went to U.S. Army Ranger School. And at U.S. Army Ranger School, I was bitter and angry and still not owning what had happened. And right up about the third day of Ranger School, I made a mistake out of my own bitterness and quit. It's the only thing I've ever quit in my life. And even the moment the words came out of my mouth, I regretted it. But I allowed ego to continue to push me forward. Next day, I had to go see the Ranger Colonel, and I knew what I had done would effectively end my career. I knew I'd be out of the Navy. I even called my wife and told her I'm coming home. I'll probably be out of the military very soon after that. And I went and saw the Ranger Colonel before the final check in the box before they process you out. And the Ranger Colonel basically asked what happened, and I laid out this sob story that I was a victim. And he said, I think you should talk to a friend of mine, a SEAL commander. And I said, I don't really want to talk to anybody right now. And he dialed up the number to probably one of the most legendary SEAL leaders we have. A guy that I would have done anything for. A guy who had been my commanding officer. A guy who had mentored me. A guy who had helped me get commissioned. A guy who had tried to educate me in leadership. What are the odds that this one guy happened to know that guy, happened to have his number on, like it appeared like speed dial, and the mere fact that he happened to be sitting at his desk in that moment when he called him and he answered. And he handed the phone to me, and I was like, I don't want to talk. And he's like, here. And I took that phone, and it was a God moment. Because I laid out this sob story about it's too late. I've made too many mistakes. I'll never be able to lead these amazing warriors again. And he said to me, people will follow you if you give them a reason to. It's never too late. It can start today. It can start right now. Your journey of faith is the same way. It's never too late. That was a miracle because it saved my career, turned my career around, and allowed me to drive forward and make a difference. So my challenge to you is even if your faith is tiny, that's okay. Matthew 17:20 says, and he saith unto them, because of your little faith, for verily I say unto you, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, you'll say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove. And nothing shall be impossible to you. He can make the difference. He can make the difference when you go through your hardship. And even though at times you may question, you may doubt, you may be right there in the center point of that life ambush, wondering how you're going to get out of this and how could he not be there. But he's there. He's there. And he's allowing you to go through that hardship. All you need is that tiny little bit of faith. I'll leave you a final story. When I got myself in trouble, it's interesting that this was the point I hit rock bottom. And it's interesting that we put so much of our faith in tangible things. Money, vehicles, jobs. It's incredible that so many of us place our faith in titles, We tie ourselves to a position. We tie ourselves to maybe a job. But the reality is those things don't really matter. in the grand scheme of things in the long run. Yet oftentimes when something catastrophic comes along, one of these life ambushes come along, we feel like we've lost everything. Some of you may feel that way right now. When I got myself in trouble, I felt that way. I felt like everything I had ever done was built around that golden emblem, that seal trident that I had, and I was facing the opportunity that they were going to take it away, and I actually believed it. And I went back to my room. I was in Afghanistan at the time when this happened. We obviously have our weapons at all times. And I sat down and I convinced myself in that moment my life was over. That I had nothing left to live for. That if they took that away, that I'd no longer existed. And I pulled out my pistol and I put it in my mouth. And I thought this was it. And thankfully, across from me was a picture of my wife and kids. And I think the big guy above pushed me in that moment and said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? You know, there's more to this. They're depending on you. Others are depending on you. And what message do you leave for others around you if you take that course?" So I put it away and I went and said, "I need help." I went to the chaplain and said, "I need help." And that once again renewed and started this new journey of faith that has carried me through step after step. Carried me through up into that moment in Ranger School. It carried me through up into that moment on the battlefield. And that's what you need to understand, that these moments that you are challenged with are opportunities to make you stronger and to renew your faith. I'm going to finish with this. John 16:33, my favorite verse, is this: "These things have I spoken to you, that in me you may have peace." When these life ambushes, when these catastrophic moments hit you, we are not at peace. We are in pain. We are struggling. We feel like the bullets of life are hitting us. Jesus went on to say, "In the world, you will have tribulation. You will have problems. You will have hardship. Life ambushes are going to hit you." But he says, "Be of good cheer. Be positive. Because be of good cheer, I have overcome the world." That's what Jesus said. I've overcome the world. Every problem that we have doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. That's powerful. So today, I want to close with a prayer for all of you. Dear Lord, I know there are so many out there right now that are listening to this, and someday I know this message is going to be posted online, and I know that there are going to be people out there that watch it. And right now, Lord, they are at rock bottom. They were like me that day where I was struggling, thinking that my life no longer mattered. In other points in my life, I questioned, could I make it? And I questioned my faith. I questioned if you were there. But you're always there. So, Lord, I ask you, like you say, to give them peace as they go through their problems, through their tribulations, through these crisis adversity, through these life ambushes, and to give them that positive attitude, to give them that hope. Place that little ember in their heart, Lord, and breathe that life into it, that fire, that ember that turns into a raging inferno, so that they know that they can overcome because you have overcome the world. I pray this for all of you out there that are struggling right now. There is hope, and he is with you. In your name I pray. Amen.